We're not tired of war. We do not want to break. We want to get ours back, our land, our homes, and our families.
Рештки російських солдат. Ноги ще у взутті.
At the heart of the confrontation between Ukraine and Russia, the devastating battle for the city of Avdiivka has become a symbol of destruction. This combat has left behind a Dantesque scene, where the echoes of violence resonate between ash-covered streets, ruined buildings, and desolate squares. Amidst the chaos, Ukrainian troops are ready to do anything to stop the enemy advance, showing a determination as surprising as it is brutal. In this new video from Military Force, we will explore the terrifying impact of war in this Ukrainian city, where every corner tells the story of sacrifice and loss. Prepare to delve not only into the harsh reality of the conflict, but to challenge your understanding of what is at stake in this seemingly endless conflict. Let's begin.
Зараз машини роблять діло. Плюс один! Плюс один! Крой, демон, нахуярилась! Я туда сейчас гранату ебану, братух!
The town of Avdiivka, once a thriving home for more than 30,000 people, has been transformed into a scene of absolute chaos. After months of intense fighting between Russian and Ukrainian forces, what remains of the place is nothing but unbearable desolation. What was once a strategically important industrial town is now just a skeleton of ruins. A reminder of the human and material cost of this brutal battle in the war, which began on February 24, 2022, and still has no end in sight. The fighting between Ukrainian and Russian forces left the streets turned into a graveyard. From the outskirts of the town to the trenches in nearby rural areas, the terrain is marked by bomb craters, burnt-out tanks, and a disturbing silence interrupted only by the occasional explosions of unexploded ordnance. The sight of dead soldiers strewn across the field is a grim testament to the price both sides are paying for every square foot of land. The Ukrainians dug in and out, fire with precision. Each explosion sends up clouds of dirt and shrapnel, trapping the Russian waves in a fiery hell. The bodies of fallen soldiers are often entangled in barbed wire, while others are buried by the earth thrown up by shells. Listen to the testimony of a Ukrainian soldier who was a protagonist of the fighting.
Тут міні-бліндаж, тут два чоловіка, тут один і отам ще два жило. Ті два ще з бойницю в поле, ми їх за першими. Потім один втік, по посадці вийшов туди, там теж їба.
Despite the brutality of the Russian attack, Ukrainian forces are not giving an inch. They are willing to sacrifice everything to stop the enemy advance. As the days pass, Russian casualties mount, but reinforcements continue to arrive. With each shot, the Ukrainians feel the weight of battle, but also the determination to protect their land at any cost. In this conflict, death dominates the landscape, but resilience and courage are palpable in every corner of Avdiivka.
Рештки одного з членів екіпажу російської БМП. Відтягнули його от сюди. Скоріше за все він зі складу. Іде бій. Да, ну а ми тут побачили. От тут вони тут були розбиті в цих посадках піхота 53-ї бригади.
On the outskirts of Avdiivka, explosions can still be heard. The conflict is still active and just as fierce. The surroundings of this strategic town are witness to incessant fighting, where Ukrainian forces and Russian troops face each other daily in a scenario that reflects the brutal wear and tear of war. The ground is marked by improvised trenches, hastily dug in the fields and roads surrounding the town, offering cover to soldiers while the echo of gunfire and shelling resounds incessantly. Russian bombardments fall relentlessly, trying to wear down Ukrainian defenses and open breaches in their lines. The Kremlin's omnipresent artillery launches shells with precision, seeking not only to destroy fortified positions, but also to break the spirit of resistance. However, Ukrainian troops, far from giving ground, respond with furious counterattacks, fighting for every inch of land the Russians try to conquer.
Чисто! Плюс. Блядь, тут блиндаж закрытый. Держи 12.
The fighting, relentless during the stifling heat of summer, does not abate when winter comes. The conditions on the battlefield change, the extreme cold hardens the ground, and the trenches turn into pits of mud and ice, but the gunfire does not stop. Despite the casualties, the destruction and physical exhaustion, the Ukrainians, armed with fierce determination, continue to defend their territory, aware that giving up Avdiivka could mean a dangerous strategic advantage for Russia.
Назад! Я 300!
Charge 300 is a code for those who have been wounded but are still alive. It is typically used in military logistics and is a call for help to their comrades. In this inhospitable environment, every hill, every forest, and every ruined building becomes a real killing field. The constant exchange of fire makes the area around Avdiivka a key point of resistance, where advancing means facing not only artillery, but also ambushes and explosives hidden in the rubble. The remains of what were once quiet villages have been transformed into defensive positions, where Ukrainian troops seek to slow the Russian advance.
Підтягуємося. Я бачив.
Підараси вонючі. Чепух. Єбаний.
On the outskirts of Avdiivka, tension is running high. Soldiers move cautiously, knowing that at any moment they could be targeted by enemy shelling or snipers. The destruction is evident, with trees split by explosions and craters littering the landscape. During the fighting, Zelensky's soldiers, experts in ambushes, launch precise javelin strikes from strategic positions. Each advancing enemy tank meets a brutal fate. Missiles hit their turrets, creating devastating explosions that tear vehicles apart and often send them flying into the air. Tank engines, hit by these shells, burst into flames while turrets are blown away, making any attempt at repair impossible. Destroyed armored vehicles pile up on top of each other at the front, blocking roads and making any further advance difficult. In this hell of twisted steel and black smoke, Ukraine's army is proving that every meter of its land will be defended at any cost. The Russians, despite their numerical superiority, face relentless resistance, where every step forward can mean total annihilation. This scene of destruction is a testament to the Ukrainian mastery of defensive tactics, using anti-tank missiles not only as lethal weapons, but also as psychological elements that trample on the enemy's morale. Russian drivers and crews, when their vehicles are hit, are in many cases trapped inside with no chance of escape. Their bodies, charred and crushed by the remains of their own machines, remain imprisoned within these metal tombs, another testament to a war that condemned them to oblivion. Although Russia has made significant progress, the area remains contested terrain, where each side fights to gain the upper hand in a conflict that seems to have no end.
Вийди, вийди.
House-by-house clearance on the outskirts of the city is a meticulous but extremely dangerous process. As Russian forces advance or retreat, Ukrainian troops are forced to check every abandoned building, looking for booby traps, hidden enemy soldiers, and unexploded ordnance. Once homes or civilian facilities, these structures become makeshift fortresses, filled with rubble and hiding places, leading to intense fighting in the blink of an eye. Teams of Ukrainian soldiers, accompanied by units of explosives experts, first enter the structures closest to the front. They use metal detectors and small drones to identify traps or mines that may have been left as a last resort by retreating Russian troops. Once the entrance is secured, the soldiers advance cautiously, checking each room floor by floor. The risk of encountering booby traps or snipers hiding in the area is constant, requiring continuous vigilance and nerves of steel. Although the exact figures remain a matter of debate, it is estimated that between 850 and 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers may have been captured during the battle for Avdiivka. However, media sources have disputed this figure, claiming that it is the result of Putin's propaganda and that the actual number of those captured is much lower. Beyond the dispute over the number of detainees and casualties, the battle underlines the urgent need for more military support from Western allies. As ammunition runs out and the dead continue to mount, President Zelensky's words resonate powerfully. The war will drag on if more weapons and resources are not supplied to Ukrainian forces. After months of fighting and fierce clashes, Ukrainian soldiers managed to reclaim territory, but at a high price. Avdiivka was the epicenter of one of the fiercest battles in the country's ongoing conflict. The streets and roads were littered with the charred remains of armored vehicles, victims of relentless artillery fire and the onslaught of portable anti-tank weapons that Ukrainian soldiers used with deadly precision. The landscape is littered with twisted steel, fragments of ammunition, and abandoned military equipment, all silent witnesses to the fierce fighting that took place in this area. Today, it is a ghost town, marked by destruction, death, and abandonment. The streets that were once full of life are now deserted, littered with rubble and the remains of a fierce confrontation.
Да, ну тут ще рештки одного російського окупанта.
Ну, ви там протоптались, там ще є.
Скільки ж їх всього? Ми вже тут ціл 20 пройшли.
Все, там подивіться, цих там, блядь, цих.
От ще один закопаний, вже присипали.
Да. Тут їх, ми подивилися, це 6-7 кілометрів, чи в полі там.
Да,
Там їх вже пообсипали землею.
Buildings, reduced to ashes by bombing, stand as tragic monuments to the devastation of war. On the battlefield and in many trenches, the corpses of Russian soldiers remain like grotesque sculptures of death, motionless and twisted in impossible positions, some with their eyes still open, staring at the leaden sky that covers this forgotten corner of the world. A grim reminder of the lives lost in a war that shows no sign of ending. Ammunition strewn along the trenches is another symbol of the chaos. Much of the fighting was fought at close range, and in some cases, troops from both sides came to grips with each other. Empty bullet casings and used hand grenades are mixed in with the remains of supplies, scattered medical kits, abandoned backpacks, and all manner of destroyed military equipment.
Якби відступали, туди хотіли закріпитися, походу. Ну, це десь в квітні приїхали, може, в березні, квітні, там є там, по документам ми вияснили, що там якась часть їхня руська, і тут вони залишилися. Ну, тут вони особо не закріплялися, просто тут сиділи, або відступали, це був ранений, і він так і залишився тут лежати.
Wrecked Russian tanks, many of them T-72 and T-90 models, lie motionless, some still smoking from direct hits from Ukrainian Javelin and NLAW missiles. Tracks are torn, Barrels twisted and black smoke billowing from their wrecked engines creates a stifling atmosphere. For the Russian soldiers who died in the attempt to take the city, there are no memorials or honors. Their bodies, in many cases, have been abandoned where they fell, mixed with the mud of the trenches or strewn across the roads, victims of the relentless machine of war.
Противник, і буквально пару місяців тому тут йшли дуже жорстокі бої, залишки яких ми бачимо, і от рештки знищеного українцями російського танку.
In the trenches that line the outskirts of Avdiivka, where Ukrainian troops desperately defended every inch of ground, the scene is equally bleak. One of the most disturbing aspects is the number of Russian bodies that remain strewn across the terrain. Ukrainian reports suggest that over the past few months of fighting, Putin's forces have suffered as many as 47,000 casualties. And while this figure includes the wounded, the death toll is staggering. The bodies of Russian soldiers mingle with the rubble, randomly thrown weapons and remnants of military supplies left behind in the hasty retreat. Some bodies have been partially covered by earth thrown up by explosions, while others lie exposed, shrouded in their destroyed uniforms, their faces scarred by the horror and suffering they experienced in their final moments of life. The trenches are a vivid reminder of the brutality of the war of attrition that has been waged there. Hastily dug into the earth, these meandering ditches bear witness to the extreme conditions in which Ukrainian soldiers fought. Some are littered with abandoned ammunition, boxes of unfired artillery shells, empty magazines, and grenades that were never thrown. Mud, soaked in blood, covers everything in its path, making the terrain slippery and dangerous. The smell of burnt gunpowder and decomposition mingles in the air, creating an unbreathable atmosphere. Russian soldiers, many of them inexperienced conscripts or prisoners forcibly enlisted in the ranks of the army, were sent to the front without proper equipment or the necessary training. Instead of quick victories, they met death in the vicinity of Avdiivka. The corpses lying abandoned on the battlefield are a mute testimony to the cruelty of Russian strategy, in which the lives of its own men are seen as expendable resources.
Хотели или думают, что при русских очень хорошо живется. Ребята, 1,5 месяца там жил. И кроме разворовывания того, что дало нам наше государство, они ничего не дают. Поверьте мне на слово. Поэтому не ждите их. Не ждите. Если вы заметили, я как бы русскоговорящий украинец. И я вам так скажу, что не верьте никакой пропаганде. Это полный бред. И вас ждет только одно. Спустя время вы будете воевать за них. Хотите вы этого или не хотите.
Pain and tragedy are not unique to Russian forces. While the narrative from the battlefield is dominated by images of the fallen, Ukrainian casualties have also been significant, although a precise number is not known. The Kiev soldiers who died defending Avdiivka were not immune to the ferocious conditions in which they fought. As Russian artillery relentlessly pounded Ukrainian defenses, many soldiers perished under the relentless fire of precision bombing. Nevertheless, Ukrainian forces put up a fierce resistance, backed by the weaponry that the West had provided them with. Avdiivka, like so many other towns in eastern Ukraine, has been transformed into an emblem of the absurdity of this war. What was once a lively town has become a devastated battlefield, where violence seems to have no end and human suffering has been normalized. The homes, streets, and factories that once defined daily life, there now exist only as ruins amid a conflict that offers no clear solution or quick way out. So, the time has come to say goodbye. We invite you to subscribe to the channel to find out about new videos about the conflict between Ukraine and Russia. Thank you very much for staying with us until the end. We look forward to seeing you again in our next installment of Military Force. See you next time.